At 9:47 this morning, a woman was taking a photo of her kids on Iran's most beautiful new bridge. By 9:49, that bridge didn't exist anymore. That's not a metaphor. That's not a dramatic exaggeration for YouTube. That is what happened today in Karaj, Iran. And the reason you probably haven't fully processed how insane that is because the news cycle moves so fast that nobody stopped to just say it plainly. The tallest bridge in the Middle East, gone in under 2 minutes on a family holiday with people on it. And then when the rescue workers arrived to help the survivors of the first strike, the second missile came. They bombed the rescue operation. 8 people confirmed dead, 95 wounded. And somewhere in Washington, a man typed "much more to follow" and hit post. Let's start with what the B-1 bridge actually was, because the mainstream coverage is treating it like a footnote, and it is anything but. This was a 447-foot structure, 136 meters tall, connecting Tehran, Iran's capital, to Karaj, its 4th largest city. It was the tallest bridge in the entire Middle East. It had been inaugurated just months ago, in early 2026, after years of construction under sanctions, under economic pressure, under international isolation. For Iranians, this bridge wasn't just concrete and steel. It was proof. Proof that despite everything the West had thrown at them, every sanction, every threat, every round of negotiations that went nowhere, they could still build something the rest of the region couldn't match. It was national pride given a physical form. And on April 2nd, 2026, the United States and Israel destroyed it on the one day of the year when Iranian families were most likely to be standing near it. April 2nd is Sizda Badar, Nature Day, the 13th day of the Persian New Year. It is one of the most deeply loved holidays in Iranian culture, the day when families pour out of their homes and into parks, riversides, and open-air spaces to celebrate life, eat together, and breathe fresh air after the long winter. The B-1 bridge, sitting above a stunning mountain gorge in the Alborz province, was exactly the kind of place families would gather on a day like this, and they did. Which is why when the first missile hit, it wasn't just infrastructure that shattered. It was a holiday. It was a Tuesday afternoon with children and grandparents and people who had absolutely nothing to do with ballistic missiles or nuclear negotiations or Operation Epic Fury. 8 of them are now dead. 95 are in hospitals across Karaj tonight. And the second strike, the one that came while paramedics and firefighters were already on the ground, is the detail that every human being watching this needs to sit with for a moment before we go any further. The U.S. military's justification, delivered through officials speaking to The Hill, was that the bridge was a planned military supply route for sustaining Iran's ballistic missile and attack drone force. That is the official line. And look, in the context of modern warfare, targeting supply infrastructure is not new. Armies have been doing it for centuries. But here's the question that justification does not answer. If this was a known military supply route, why was it struck on the most crowded civilian day of the Iranian calendar? Why not at 3 a.m.? Why not on a Tuesday in February when nobody is standing on a mountain bridge taking photos? The timing is either a catastrophic intelligence failure or a deliberate choice. And either answer is deeply troubling, because if it was a failure, that tells you the operation has serious problems with civilian protection protocols. And if it was deliberate, if the goal was maximum psychological impact on the Iranian population, then what happened today crosses a line that cannot be uncrossed. But if you thought that was the most disturbing part of this story, stay with me, Patty, because part 2 is where this gets truly dangerous for the entire region. Iran didn't stay quiet for long. Within hours of the B-1 bridge collapsing into the gorge, Tehran's response was already taking shape. And it wasn't the response of a government looking for a way out. It was the response of a government that has decided, after 5 weeks of Operation Epic Fury, that it has absolutely nothing left to lose. Iran's state-affiliated Fars news agency, directly tied to the Revolutionary Guards, published a list of targets, not vague threats, not diplomatic warnings, an actual list. The Allenby Bridge connecting the West Bank and Jordan, the Adam Bridge on the Jordan River, the King Fahd Bridge connecting Bahrain to Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Abu Dhabi, Iraq. These are not Iranian enemies. These are countries that have been desperately trying to stay out of this conflict. And Iran just put their infrastructure on a target list in direct retaliation for what happened in Karaj this morning. The moment this war stops being between Iran and the US-Israeli coalition and starts pulling in Saudi Arabia, Jordan, and the Gulf states, the entire calculation changes overnight. And that moment is now closer than it has ever been. Let's talk about what's already happening on the missile front, because the bridge strike did not happen in isolation. In the 24 hours leading up to and following the B-1 attack, Iran fired approximately 30 missiles into Israel, including cluster munitions, one of the most indiscriminate weapon types in any military arsenal. Hezbollah launched barrages from Lebanon. The Houthis in Yemen fired simultaneously. This is a coordinated multi-front pressure campaign that is not slowing down. It is accelerating. And now, with Iran's leadership able to point to a destroyed national landmark on a family holiday as fresh justification for escalation, the domestic political pressure inside Tehran to hit back harder is immense. Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi didn't mince words. He called the strike evidence of America's defeat and moral collapse. That kind of language is not written for an international audience. It is written for 90 million Iranians who just watched their country's most celebrated new bridge disappear on a holiday. It is a rallying cry, and it is working. Now, here is the part of this story that the financial news is starting to quietly panic about, even while the geopolitical coverage dominates the headlines. The Strait of Hormuz, that narrow, irreplaceable channel of water at the mouth of the Persian Gulf, through which roughly 20% of the entire world's oil supply moves every single day. Iran has threatened to close it before. But those were threats made from a position of relative stability. Today's threat comes from a government whose most iconic bridge just fell into a mountain gorge, whose rescue workers were hit in a second strike, and whose foreign minister is publicly calling America morally bankrupt. This is a completely different threat environment. The Gulf Cooperation Council is already calling on the UN Security Council to guarantee navigation through the strait. Saudi Arabia is watching its own bridges get named as potential targets. If the strait closes, even for days, not weeks, oil prices spike to levels that would send shockwaves through every economy on Earth. The war between the US and Iran is no longer just a Middle East story. It is a global economic story, and almost nobody is saying that loudly enough right now. Trump said Wednesday night that the war is almost over. He said victory was close. 12 hours later, he ordered the destruction of the tallest bridge in the Middle East on a national holiday, posted the video online, and typed, "Much more to follow." Iran responded by threatening bridges across 5 countries and firing 30 missiles into Israel. Rescue workers got caught in a second strike. 8 people are dead. 95 are wounded. The Strait of Hormuz is in play, and the rest of the Middle East is holding its breath. This is not a war winding down. This is a war entering its most unpredictable and dangerous phase yet. The bridge that fell today wasn't just concrete and steel. It was the last guardrail, and now it's gone.